I want to, first of all, start by saying that what is important to me today is actually a discussion that I'm going to have with you regarding our uh, wonderful situation in the struggle for liberation. I want to start by, first of all, making reference and paying homage to our First Nations, our African American people, for our own ancestors and our struggle, but also for the native peoples of this land, the indigenous Africans, and rather the indigenous residents, including in the Philadelphia area, the Lenape, because the Lenape represent, in my judgment, the people who have done most to try to bring us to an understanding and appreciation that Columbus was not all he was put up to be. That in fact, people who had 13 million people here at one time were reduced down to 250,000 by 1900. That is the sad truth of the destruction of the First Nations in America. So I want to just briefly go over some of the ideas that I have for you, and just to talk about them. Some of you already have recorded a version of this presentation, but this presentation had to be actually re-recorded in order to be on the proper linkage that we needed for the Zoom. So I'm trying to just go over some of the main things. The way I want to start is with African American ancestors that we have often forgotten. And these are ancestors I say we have often forgotten, mainly because part of what has happened is that we don't remember Gabriel Prosser. We don't necessarily remember Charles Deslandes. We don't remember even Denmark Vesey or Nat Turner. But I want to mention them because they are extremely important. Gabriel Prosser, as you may know, was a blacksmith by trade. And he was born in Virginia. And in 1800, he led what was one of the largest rebellions of, at least it was going to be one of the largest rebellions ever in the history of the Americas. He was a very strong, tall brother, learned to be a blacksmith when he was a child. And he was so knowledgeable about the area in Virginia that he visited many, many places. And he was, it was told that he had stolen a pig and that he was punished for it. But in a fight with the overseer, he bit off the man's ear. And to bite off or to maim a white man meant sure death. But because he knew a Bible verse, they had some law they called the benefit of clergy. And he was able to recite a Bible verse, and they said, okay, we'll just brand you instead. You are a valuable worker, we won't kill you. But he planned, therefore, a slave revolt, a revolt of the African people. And he got thousands of people throughout about 5 counties to join with him. And they all made weapons, and he took all the blacksmiths who were the makers of guns then too, and knives, and he got them to make extra guns and knives so that they could be able to supply the people with weapons as they fought against the Europeans. And unfortunately for them, there was a big thunderstorm on the night of August the 30th, the night they were supposed to start this revolt, and it caused them to postpone it until Monday. But by that time, a number, 3 or 4 Black people had gone and told their slaveholders that there was going to be a revolt of thousands of people, and the militia began to go around and picking up Black people from different plantations. And they were told that Gabriel Prosser had organized it, but he swam out into the James River on his way toward a schooner that had been there. He thought that perhaps he could escape and go to some other city or some other country. And when he got there, unfortunately for him, 2 of the Africans who were there, they were named Isham was one of them, and the other one was Billy. They alerted the captain and said, that's Gabriel Prosser. And Gabriel Prosser is the one who is organizing this. Of course, the white people had offered them $300 if they told, if they were able to tell who it was who had organized this. And they told the white people that it was Gabriel Prosser. They didn't give them $300, which would have been enough to buy their freedom. They gave them $50 and kept them enslaved. But they had told on Gabriel Prosser. And so Prosser was killed. Scores of other Black people who had helped him to organize. Some people say even over 100 Black people were killed and lynched in a massacre. White people were very frightened. This was, remember, before the Haitian Revolution. 1800 was about 4 years before Dessalines had conquered Leclerc and the French in Haiti. So this was a major scare in Virginia, where you had a huge population of Black people. But the largest slave rebellion was probably the one on the German coast of Louisiana in 1811 that was led by Charles Deslandes. Sometimes it's pronounced Delan because it's spelled Deslandes. And we probably know about him the least and know about his revolt in 1811 when there were a growing number of Africans in Louisiana, and many of them by 1811 had experienced the Haitian Revolution. They knew about it. There was a great relationship between Louisiana and Haiti. Remember, the French controlled Louisiana at one time, and they controlled Haiti as well. So Charles Deslandes and 25 others went out and they killed the slaveholders in their area. From plantation to plantation, they killed them. Actually, some people said they probably killed about 40 or 50 of them. But then once they had done that, and they were discovered again because they did not have the weapons that the whites had. The whites got a militia of nearly 1,000 people to go after them, and they captured many of them, including Deslandes, and then they killed them, and they put their heads on poles, stretching all the way from the city of New Orleans down to New Place. And they actually, along the highway, so that a roadway, so that Africans, when they walked by, they could see that if you did something to try to revolt, this is what would happen to you by the white people. This was 1811, remember that date. And then in 1822, we had the great Denmark Vesey, who had been born in St. Thomas, who was taken by his slaveholder to South Carolina, to Charleston. He became a sailor. He knew boats, he knew ships. And he in 1800, he had luck. He won the lottery. And when he won the lottery, he bought himself a carpentry shop, and he bought his freedom for $600. And after that, he did not like the way he was treated as an African man. He had consciousness. He traveled from area to area on the boats, on the ships. And so by 1822, he had decided that he was going to lead 50,000 Africans in South Carolina to Haiti or to Africa. And they were going to go and take over the port of Charleston, get the vessels, put the Africans on, and leave the situation in the United States of America. Of course, some of the people told the white people about this, and 133 Black people were arrested and killed. And Denmark Vesey goes down in our history as one of our greatest people ever because of the scheme to rescue 50,000. That was more than anybody had wanted to do. But probably the most successful was Nat Turner, who in 1831, on the night of August the 21st, and into the day of August the 22nd, 1831, had led a successful revolt. His passion for freedom in Southampton County, Virginia was so great that he rebelled against degradation, no longer wanting to be property, no longer wanting to be a commodity, wanting to be a human being. And he went with his about 60 or 70 people. Once he got a collection of Africans from different plantations, and they killed every white person they saw, went from house to house, and nearly 60 whites were killed. Finally, when the white people were alarmed, they called for the military and the local militia to about 3,000. So about 3,000 white people went throughout the county looking for Nat Turner, and they didn't find him till 2 months later, but they lynched and killed more than 100 Black people, relatives of people who had been engaged in the killing. This thing really frightened them that Black people had risen up and had gone from house to house, plantation to plantation, killing the slaveholders. That just shows you they believed that the degradation and the dehumanization and the oppression was so great that they had no other option but to kill the white people who had put them in this condition. But when they finally caught Nat Turner, he had been living in the country of the Nottoway Indians for 2 months. And he was just discovered by accident by a farmer in that area who went and told the white people that, yes, I think I've seen Nat Turner. And he was lynched, he was skinned. They took his skin off of him and they beheaded him and put his head as a trophy. So when I say liberation, and that's why I said I call this lecture Liberation, because what I mean is that we have to be liberated in almost every way you can think of. We have to be liberated socioeconomically, politically, spiritually, culturally. If we are not, we remain enslaved. We remain people who are victims, you see? And I always say that the African people are the only ones in the last maybe 500 years, maybe even 1,000 years, the only people who have been raped, brutalized, denied humanity, used as commodities, exported like we were goods. Our natural resources were stolen by the Europeans and Arabs. Our societies were torn apart. Our social bonds were disrupted. And during enslavement, they had what they call patty rollers. This was before the police, that they used to destroy us. And so I look at the names of the people that we have lost over the years, and some of them have not been on videotapes, but we know the ones that we have seen, such as Michael Brown laying for hours in the middle of the street in Ferguson, Tamir Rice, the young boy killed by the Cleveland police, Oscar Grant, and who was killed in Baltimore, and Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks. You can go down, down, down the list, because almost 1,000 Black people are killed by the police every year. And most of them are not on videotapes, and most of them are not on cameras. But people are arrested, they are handcuffed behind their backs, and they are beaten, or the necks are broken. And then, of course, the police get off free, as if they have committed no crime. Their hands are dripping with the blood of Black people from the time of their ancestors to now. So an African, people ask me sometimes, who is an African? An African is one who, and this is why when I say liberation, I'm talking about liberation of Africans. African is one whose ancestors have gone through this experience and heritage of being oppressed by the Europeans or the Arabs and fighting against it. And we have to remember that the color Black, being Black, it may be a characteristic feature of some of us, but it does not alone define who is an African. So it is to be an African, you have to understand that the legacy of sustained dominance, of brutal exploitation, and the persistent enslavement that we experience, this is what really defines us as African people. It is important for me to say to you that liberation is a social, cultural, and political process for self-rediscovery, but it's also a spiritual process where we seek to sort of rehumanize ourselves and return I say rehumanize, actually, we have always been human, but in our own minds, we've got to reclaim the dignity of our human history. And remember that colonialism and dependence on Europe removed our people from history. Liberation essentially is the return of the African people on the continent and in the diaspora back into history, such that we take our rightful place in the course of human development. And I don't want to just occupy time by talking about Africans in the United States. Of course, we have a noble history, but the history of Black people in the Americas is noble. Everywhere you look, every place, you will see the same kinds of things. Ganga Zumba in Brazil led a massive runaway settlement called Quilombo das Palmares, or sometimes they call it Angola Janga. In the present state of Alagoas, Brazil, Zumba became a legendary figure because he escaped bondage on a sugar plantation, rose to the position of the emperor, the king of Palmares. And later on, he was challenged by his nephew Zumbi for the national leadership of Palmares. And in fact, I've been to Salvador and have seen the statue of Zumbi, who is the national hero of the Afro-Brazilians. And in Jamaica, Queen Nanny, in 1976, she became the only female who was considered a national hero in Jamaica because she was a military tactician and strategist, had an incredible success fighting the British, and who suffered horrendous losses in their encounters with the Maroons. This is what the people were called, who had escaped from bondage, and she led them in the 18th century. She died around 1755, but she had led a community of people who learned how to fight against the colonizers in Jamaica. Queen Nanny was born in Ghana of the Akan people, and her history is equal to the history, sometimes we say, of Asantewa, because she was a fighter, skill in the art of knowing how to booby trap the British. And then there's Dessalines, Jean-Jacques, and to me, perhaps the most successful of our revolters against the enslavement. He was born around 1758 and died in 1806. But in that time, he became the leader of the Haitian Revolution and the first ruler of independent Haiti under the 1805 Constitution. Dessalines made Haiti the first country in the Americas to permanently abolish slavery. And he was named Emperor Jacques I of Haiti by the generals of the Haitian Revolution Army. I call him one of the founding fathers of Haiti, alongside, of course, Toussaint Louverture, who started the formal rebellion, and also Christophe, and maybe Pétion. But before them, you also had the Mackendal and Boukman and Basile, the female leader who also worked with the Hugon Boukman. So many victories, but all resistance and battling for liberation. This was the struggle that Black people had. I say that we didn't accept colonialism, even we didn't even accept, well, we shouldn't have accepted. We did accept to a large degree the boundaries that were set by the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 85. We have to remind ourselves that even in all of these situations, we struggled, we fought. The Zulu fought against the British. The Asante fought against the British. The people of Zimbabwe fought against the British. That's why we have the incredible names like Nehanda and Kaguvi. I mean, we've had fighters everywhere against this demeaning and insulting and crazy madness of the European in trying to enslave African people. We've had the great victory that Menelik II had when he defeated the Italians in 1896 at the Battle of Ottawa in Ethiopia. So we have to, we recognize what Malcolm said. We recognize what Elijah said. We recognize the incredible deviousness that Europe has used against African people, even against other people in the world too, because in 1916, the British and the French held secret meetings known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement, by which they had agreed that most of the lands that were under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, particularly the ones where Arabs live, would be divided into the British sphere of influence or the French sphere of influence at the end of World War I, the first great European war. And I like to point this out because people think that the boundaries that we have in Africa or elsewhere somehow are sacred, that they existed from the beginning of time. But no, these are all created, made up by, mainly in the last 500 years by the Europeans. They have decided what was this and what was that, you see? So we've had to have freedom struggles because we had to get rid of settlers and colonizers on the African continent. The African struggle for freedom started with the process of decolonization. That's the first thing we had to do. And sometimes we had negotiations like in Uganda and Tanzania, Nigeria and Ghana, and Cameroon, Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Mali and Niger. But sometimes there had to be revolutionary armed struggle, such as in Angola and Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau and Algeria And sometimes we had to struggle with the internal settlers, those people who settled in our country themselves, like in Zimbabwe and South Africa and Southern Sudan and Eritrea. These have all been struggles that we've had to fight, you see. In sometimes different ways, these struggles have come about. And I always tell people, I love talking about Sudan. I've never been to Sudan, and I was questioned about that by one of the foreign ministers of Sudan when I was critical of Sudan, because Sudan is a country where 85% of the people are African and 15% claim to be Arabs. And even the 15% that claim to be Arabs, many of them, their grandmothers and great grandmothers are African people. And but they have taken on the Arab culture. They have forgotten their own indigenous languages. They've forgotten their own indigenous customs and traditions. And they have become Arabs, basically, even though they are black skinned. And they have confused a lot of blacks in America, particularly the Congressional Black Caucus, because they have told the Congressional Black Caucus, look, we're not persecuting the Africans, we just like y'all. We look like y'all, and so why would we be persecuting the black people? But in effect, for the Arabs in Sudan, many of them are darker skin, but they have they don't have an African culture in their mind. They hate Africans. They see Africans as inferior. The darker you are, the more inferior you are. And if you don't believe or accept the Arab culture, then they want to consider that you are the devil, you're a heathen, you're a pagan, you see. And they do this all over Sudan. Sudan is a big, boisterous country. It's where my maternal ancestors come from. I love Sudan in many ways, loving it from afar, because as I said, I haven't been there. But the interesting thing about Sudan is that the people in Darfur, they're fighting for their liberation, even though they're Muslims. So it's not religion. It's not whether or not you believe in Islam. The people in Darfur believe in Islam. Perhaps the majority of the people in Sudan believe in Islam or accept Islam. But what they want is their own culture. They don't want to be Arab just because they accept Islam. But the Arab government wants to force them into being Arabs and not being African. The people say, we love our language, we love our people, we love our ancestors, we love our food, we love our music, we love our people, we love the beauty of who we are. We don't want to be Arabs. The ones who want to be Arabs, they then persecute the ones who say that we don't want to be Arabs, we just want to be Africans, even if whatever the religion we have. Our religion could be anything. It could be African religion, Nuba Mountain, Blue Nile people's religion. It doesn't have to be Arab religion, you see. So this is a big struggle that's going on right now in Sudan. And there are other countries where black people are being persecuted for being black, such as Libya, for example, and also not just Libya, but Mauritania. So there's a relentlessness with which the Arabs are pursuing the people of Africa to bring into existence their cultural objectives, you see. So we've got to watch out for that. And we've got to work to support the Nuba people and the Fonji people and the Marsali and the Nubians and the Beja, you see. It's extremely important. This has to be our model. The Southern Sudan influence is a big one in the rest of the country, and let's hope that Southern Sudan can get itself together so that it will become the leader and the model for what a country should be that would be open to all religions and all people. And this is incredible, and it's useful because, as a matter of fact, I've found that those people who call themselves Arabs, a lot of them are indeed they're mixed race people. They're born to Arab fathers and African mothers, and then they forget their mother's people. So we need a popular base, mass-based political party everywhere in Africa and everywhere in the African world. We need people who understand African national consciousness and our cultural and historical belongings. And we got to teach the rank and file of our people that they've got to get rid of colonial boundaries, because these colonial boundaries, they're hindering us. I mean, we got people who don't want other people. Don't come to my country because you're not a member of our nationality. Well, those boundaries were created by Europe, many of them in the first place. I mean, so who's established the boundaries between Cameroon and Nigeria? You know, you can't, I mean, our people didn't have those boundaries. So we've got to deal with that. And we have to also remember, as African Americans, and I've talked to a lot of African Americans, whether we're in Brazil or Canada or Mexico or the US, that the world is bigger than the Americas, that we have to all fight here too, the Pan-European Academy. We've got to all study ancient Egypt and Nubia. We've got to all read classical African literature and establish our basis for scholarship. Teach our children the values and the virtues of community and the concept of Iwa Pele. We need to solve not just the symptoms of racism, but we must abandon the entire European ethic of violence, individualism, and destruction. It's a different world. It's not a world of Ma they believe in. And we see how they have treated African people all over the world, and particularly here in America. And then all these examples we're seeing on video now, they represent something. They represent the vile, vicious nature of people who hate Africans for no reason. You can't give me any legitimate reason why Africans are hated by Europeans. And when a white person does something bad, you can see how the police treat them. Take Deal on the Roof and Aja Boateng told us this. When Deal on the Roof, the white supremacists who killed 9 members of a church in 2015 in Charleston, when he was arrested, the police officers, in spite of the horrendous nature of the crime he committed, saw his humanity and offered him a Burger King meal because he was hungry. They felt compassion for him. His humanity was given to him. But they didn't give humanity to Eric Garner. And he hadn't committed a crime like that. They didn't give humanity to Ahmaud Arbery. They didn't give humanity to Rashad Brooks. No, because they considered African people less than. What is this white fear? What is it based on? I think that they envy our love of life, our ingenuity, our resilience, our physicality, our intelligence, our sexuality, our original humanity, our memory, our spirituality. It has to be something like that because it's not normal. It's an abnormal behavior. It's almost a psychological behavior. Racism is not normal behavior. Normal human beings don't act like that, but that's the way Europeans act. So, but we've got to rethink our own liberation. We have to remember that the United States of America was created on the basis of the genocide of the First Nations. It was created on the basis of the enslavement and murder of African people. So if we always pay attention to honoring the First Nations, if we pay attention to establishing what I call the Tano network, which is 5 households. If you in one household, you go out and find 4 other households that you can form a network you can unite with. And you can organize, as Kwame Ture used to say, organize, organize, organize. Don't try to get 100. Just try to get 5 families. Your family, 4 other families. Organize. You read African history and culture and learn to teach your children how to love each other and how to love themselves and how to respect their ancestors. Create rituals for them. This is what many organizations in the African world have been doing from time to time. We have to do this. We have to do this. It is the only way that we will truly be liberated as African people. All power to you and blessings to you. And may you always remember to do the best things that will bring us into the new day of a different tomorrow.